Hello Internet, and welcome to the third session in our editing series of webinars. My name is Dave and I'm a member of the support team here at Smartbox. Over the next half an hour or so, we're going to add to the skills from the previous sessions with some of our favourite editing tips and tricks. These are tricks that our specialists use on visits, our content team when they're creating new grids, and even here in support when we're helping people to customize their own grids. So today we're going to be focusing on grid 3 and the ways that you can make editing just a little bit quicker and easier, especially if you spend a lot of time editing grids. We also hope to do a similar session on Grid for iPad at a later date. So to recap so far, Grid 3 is a complete communication system with a range of symbol and text vocabularies, as well as grid sets to support independence. All of the skills we look at throughout this editing series can be used across the range of grid sets in Grid 3, including those you create yourself. All of the sessions in our editing series are designed for complete beginners. You'll probably want to watch the first two webinars before this one though. So I'm going to bring grid onto the screen. Go. So my first tip is related to the menu bar. Now, often we'll tell you to press menu, bring up the menu bar, and people tend to go for right in the corner up in here, the little three lines you can see here. And actually, you don't have to press that particular bit. You can press anywhere along this top bar, as long as you don't hit these three in the corner. And you can see there, when I click there, it brings up the menu. This is particularly useful for if you're using a touch screen, as that little menu button can be really quite small. So I'm going to jump into a grid set first. I'm going to use Supercore 30 as my example for the moment. Loads. Okay. So I'm going to bring us into edit mode. Now hopefully you should know how to get into edit mode already. Go to edit grid, and then the first thing we're going to look at is the grid set view. So in the top left hand corner up here you can see the blue tab that says grid set. You press that, it gives us a full view of all of the grids within our grid set, making it a lot easier to browse your grids or search for a particular one. So maybe I want to do some work on a grid about school, so I can search in the top right hand corner, type in school, and I can see there's a few grids here already showing up within Supercore related to school. And from there I can load up my page. So if I select it and I can double click, or I can choose jump to from the bottom here. I'm going to go just back to the grid set view because there's actually a couple of things that we can do from that particular page. So if you do a lot of editing and like to be organized, you may want to rename your grids. So I go back to here, and maybe I don't want a second page of jobs, or I want to call it something different. I can select that particular grid, and at the bottom I've got the option of rename. Pressing that brings up a little window and I can type in a new name here. Now I'm going to keep the first part and I'm going to rename jobs to career. Because why not? Get rid of page 2. And it's worth bearing in mind that how you name your grids will affect the order of them, of how they appear in this section. So you can see they're showing in what would be alphabetical order. We've got numbers. So within Supercore, Daisy Clay, who designed Supercore, has made these so that they all show in a very particular order. You've got the numbers and then there's little letters afterwards, so that all of the people pages are showing up together, all of the actions pages are showing up together. There's lots of thought gone into the naming of these grids so that they show up in a particular order. And the next thing we're going to have a look at is adding in a page from a grid set, a different grid set. So again, from this same screen still, on the left hand side, we've got the option here of add from another grid set. We choose that, we then get to see all of the other grid sets within this user. So I've only got a few at the moment, but perhaps I like the keyboard page as it is in TextTalker. So I can choose TextTalker, choose next, and then I see the full list of grids within that TextTalker grid set. And maybe I want a particular page, perhaps I want a QWERTY keyboard. I can search for that page, and I've got my QWERTY keyboard here. Add that one in. And then within my grid set, I should now have QWERTY. You can see I've got my TextTalker page in here. Now that's particularly useful if you know there's a page in another grid set that does exactly what you need. You don't want to have to make it from scratch, so you can just add it in to the grid set that you're using. And Smartbox grid sets often have a template grid. So you can also, from here, you can copy an existing grid in the grid set. So if I wanted to create a particular page, if I find an example template, you can see here there's a whole bunch of grids that say template. And maybe I've used all of these already and I need another one. I can copy that existing grid, call it template 4, I think we've got 3 already. And then we've got this new page. The next thing we're going to have a quick look at is changing the home page within a grid set. Now the home page is the first grid that is shown when the grid set is opened. So if I come out of edit mode, save my changes, jump out to Grid Explorer. When I jump into SuperCore, the first page I see is my core page. If I was to go into any one of my other grid sets, so I'm actually going to go back out and go to TextTalker. The first page I see is a QWERTY keyboard. But perhaps I'm working with a user that doesn't need a QWERTY keyboard. They want a different page, and I know that already exists within my grid set. Now, TextTalker does have this built in as a function, but I could also do this through editing. If I go into edit mode, again using that tip of clicking anywhere along the menu bar, and then go to my grid set tab, and perhaps I'm using I need a frequency keyboard. Isn't called frequency. Okay, let's go for ABC. There we go, ABC keyboard. And I want this particular page to be my home page rather than the QWERTY one. So select that grid, and along the bottom, I've got the option of set as home. So if I choose that, I've got a little house next to it now to show me that it's a home grid. And I can demonstrate that coming out of edit mode, save my changes. I'll need to quit to Grid Explorer, jump back in, and TextTalker opens to the ABC keyboard instead of the QWERTY keyboard that it was using previously. I'm going to go back into edit mode. And the next thing is another little tip for people editing on touchscreens particularly. If you need to select multiple cells, that can be a little bit of a challenge because you need to get in between these cells and click and drag across. And particularly on a smaller screen, that's not a big gap at all, certainly smaller than a finger. The one thing you can do is if you come up to the layout option, you've got this feature of the spacing between cells. So if we set that spacing to be extra large or possibly even jumbo, that gives us just that little bit of extra room between the cells, hopefully a little bit more space for your finger, and you can get in between select all the cells you need to, do whatever it is you're doing with them, as you're copying or moving them around, and then you can just set your spacing back to whatever you were using previously. Set it back to medium. And if you are using a mouse and a keyboard, you can actually use control click to select cells that aren't next to each other. So it doesn't really make sense on this particular page, but if I wanted to select just some of the letters, or maybe I know I need my rest, I need my speak cell, I need my clear, and I want those on all pages, I can press and hold control on my keyboard, and I can select these cells without having to drag a box over them all. And then I could easily copy and paste those between pages. The next thing we're going to look at is a little bit about symbol searching. I'm going to take us back into a symbol grid set. So I'm going to take us back to Super. And to jump into edit mode. And if I'm going to select a cell so that I can look at my symbols, and then find picture is how you can search for a symbol. So whenever you put some text on a cell, Grid will automatically suggest a symbol for you, and then you do also get these options along the top. But if none of those are suitable or they're not quite right, use find picture, and that brings up a little window which shows some more suggestions, and it also shows a search. So there's all kinds of symbols in Grid 3, from concepts such as pain, so we've got some paint in there as well, but you hurt and pain and ache, to another example which is rather bizarre but kind of cute, which is puffin in a bucket. I'm not really sure where that one's come from, but Widget decided that that's something worthwhile including in their symbol set, along with puffin walked out. Why not? And you can also browse by topic. So if I just remove my search terms altogether, you see some topics. So maybe I know I'm doing something with leisure. I don't really know what the appropriate symbol might be. So if I find leisure in my list, open that one up, and then I get some examples. Arts and crafts, shopping, toys and games, and maybe that gives me a better idea of what I'm looking for, and then I can come into here and Grid's showing me whatever symbol libraries I'm using. It's showing me some example symbols from that particular symbol set, from that category. Right. So is that we don't actually want to change the symbol on the I cell. So next I'm going to come into settings, and we're going to have a look at a little tip around pronunciation. So there are some times when Grid won't speak the phrase that you're using. Now I'm just going to set myself a voice, Graham. And so, for example, it's quite common with names. You've got a less than common name, or even something. So we're based in a town called Malvern, but that's spelt with an A. So a lot of voices pronounce it as Malvern. So we can come into pronunciation, so in settings, and then speech, pronunciation, and I can type the word in as it's supposed to be written, and then in the pronunciation section I'm just going to type in how it should be, and then hit test, and we'll hear how it sounds. Right? And then if I change that to how it could be said phonetically, so if I say that with a U as Malvern, that should sound more like how Malvern is supposed to be pronounced. Not sure if you guys are hearing that, but that said it more like it is supposed to. And then I just need to hit add pronunciation to make sure that's in my list. And now anytime Grid sees the word Malvern spelt like this, it will instead use my special pronunciation rule. And it's worth noting as well that depending on what voice you're using, it might pronounce things differently. So this Malvern example with a different voice may sound right just with the normal spelling of Malvern. And you can experiment with different pronunciations. So I saw someone the other day, for example, who had FIFA, and the way that they had chosen to have that as a pronunciation, like this, F-E-E-F-U-H, because that probably gets pronounced F-I-F-A, and most people will just say FIFA. Okay, the next little tip is one that's perhaps something that seems obvious, but it happens to us all, and it's just a simple save your work, save your changes, and save them regularly. It happens to all of us that your device runs out of battery or the computer crashes, you know, all kinds of things. But just making sure that you have a recent save so that you don't lose anything. You don't wait. You know, it takes all of 2 seconds to hit Control and S on your keyboard. And a nice little way to tell if your work has been saved is that you might see a little star in the corner up here. So if I just quickly change this cell here, don't want, you can see up where it says page 1, got page 1 and then a little asterisk. Let me know I haven't, what I'm working on at the minute isn't a saved piece of work. So if I now hit Control and S, you'll see that disappear. There we go. So that's a bit of a lifesaver, making sure that you've got regularly saved work. And that kind of touches on our next point, which is about keyboard shortcuts. So I've just used Control and S. The Grid 3 has a lot of the regular keyboard shortcuts that you can find elsewhere in Windows. So you might be familiar with some of these already. Control and C will copy a cell, and then Control and V will paste that cell, or group of cells even. You can use Control and Z or Control and Z for American viewers to undo any mistakes or things that you didn't mean to do. And then we've got some that are also unique to Grid 3. So for don't want, I think I actually used the F2 keyboard shortcut, which is to quickly change the label. And I can set that back to what it's supposed to be. We've got F3 to change the symbol, brings up the little symbol window. If you are looking at a cell that is a jump cell, you can select the cell and choose follow cell from the left, or Control and F follows that jump without having to press anything else. Just a nice quick way to do that. Alt and Home will jump us back to the home grid, and Alt and Back might not work at this point. It does. Jumps us back to the page from where we came. The next little bit is something you may have stumbled across, or you may well not have. And so we're going to go into Settings again, and we are going to go to Grid Set. You have to be within a grid set to see this. Go to Grid Set, and then on the right hand side, if we scroll down just a touch, you can see this Analysis option. There's a button here that says Grid Set Analysis. Open this up. So this is a useful little tool for seeing some details about your grid set. So you can see here the language of the grid set, the file size. So this is quite a useful one, particularly for us in support. If you're working with a really large grid set, things can get a little bit slow. You can see how many pages you've got. You can see if your grid set is compatible with Grid for iPad or Grid Player. And we can also see that this particular grid set has a couple of grids that aren't reachable from the home grid. Now it might be, so you can see the QWERTY one, which I think is the page that I added in from Text Talker, and the template as well. So these are just things that I've added in that I haven't really finished working on yet. You can see the sizes of the grids, how many columns and rows they've got, and then really usefully, you can see what symbol sets you are using and how many of each you've got. So particularly any of you that might be using Grid Player at all, you may have had to use this to take out any license symbols. So there's all kinds of bits in here, all sorts of bits about the styles that are in use in your grid set. So just some potentially useful little bits of information in there that could help you analyze more about what you might need to know about your grid set. So that actually brings us to the end of the tips webinar for today. Hopefully it's been something that's been useful for you. We're going to be doing some more of these webinars in the future, so please do let us know if you found it useful and what else you might like to see. Pop into our Facebook community and leave us a comment or drop us an email. And the stuff covered in this series is just a taster of what you might learn at one of our Getting Started with Grid events. These are our one-day training events that take place across the UK. We've got some more lined up for this winter, so keep an eye out for those, or get in touch if you're interested in coming along to one. You'll get a good grounding in how to do all sorts of bits and pieces, so making grid sets, adding cells, adding commands to cells, and very much stuff in line with what we've been doing over the last few webinars. So thanks for joining me today. If you have any more questions about anything we've covered, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can use the email address on the screen now, or find us in the Smartbox community on Facebook. Rob has been helping me along in the chat on YouTube. We'll keep that running for just a little bit longer and answer any more questions on there. But otherwise, please do get in touch by email. So we've had a question in the chat from someone asking if you can use Spanish and English on the same page. It's not possible. Well, you could use Spanish and English on the same page. French and English on the same page. Sorry. Sorry, we've had both. Just having a quick look at the comments on here. So you could. The grid set has a specific language set to itself, so the voice that's used will be specific to that language. So if you have a grid set to English, Grid will use an English voice. If you have a grid set that is specified to be French or Spanish, it will use the appropriate voice, assuming you have one installed. If you write a French word and your grid set is set to English, Grid will use your English voice and probably try and pronounce it likely incorrectly. What we would recommend is that you have a duplicate of your own grid set to the different language, so you can have a version in English and a version in French and or a version in Spanish, and then when you switch between the two, Grid will switch to the appropriate voice as long as you have one installed. So you could have Text Talker in English and Text Talker in French and Text Talker in Spanish, and switch between the two, and Grid would start using the correct voices. That also means that Grid will then use the correct predictions, and any spell checking will be done for the correct language also. Nailed it.